Yeah, this is the place where people are talking about something new and important and fresh and exciting every day. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. And Debbie, today, as we, it seems like, hurdle light speed toward the holidays. Yeah, a lot of people don't even want to be reminded of that. But it's not just during the holidays, but it really becomes, I think, a heightened reality for us, Debbie, that if we have non-Catholic friends or family or just we're in a lot of different contexts, if you will, and faith conversations often can come up. And again, it's not just this time of year, but we're going to be joined by Steve Ray today, Deb, and we're going to talk about how to relate to non-Catholic family and friends, because it can be tough for us. We can get challenged. We can not really know what to say. We can be uncomfortable. We sometimes even want to kind of hide the fact that we're Catholic. Don't make the sign of the cross at the meal or anything. So this is really, Debbie, a show everybody should have some kind of an interest in today.
We hope to impart some really practical tools and ideas on how to approach our friends and our family members who are non-Catholic, and how to make it an enjoyable experience, one that is real inspiring and edifying to all parties, and not be something that we maybe get a little bit anxious about or nervous about when we are entering into the situations. Like you said, Jerry, holidays are going to be all around us. There's going to be tons of events, tons of gatherings, and it just may come upon us very quickly, and we may not know how to handle it. So that today's the day we're going to talk about it, how to really engage with our non-Catholic friends and family. So dear listeners, here we go. We're going to give you the number, and we get so excited at this, Jerry and I, because the phone lines light up, so fast. You guys have so many things to share, your experiences, your takes on things. So here's the number if you want to weigh in on this conversation that we're about to have. It's 1-800-585-9396.
And our guest, Steve Ray, he has produced what he calls 7 rules for dealing with non-Catholic family and friends. And I'm going to mention those right after we introduce Steve, and then we can touch upon each of them briefly. But your calls, your takes drive the show. Have you had an experience, well, obviously it's almost certain that you have, of being in a situation where things just got a little uncomfortable, maybe tense? Maybe not. Maybe you just had this fantastic faith conversation with a non-Catholic family member or friend. Describe your situation. Remember, this is a ministry, this show, and what you share with our listeners on the air really could give them some great ideas. So again, it's 1-800-585-9396. Debbie, our guest today, Steve Ray, is himself a convert to the Catholic faith. He is so very, very involved in a lot of things. Anyone who's seen the Footprints of God videos from Ignatius Press, he's the creator and host of those. And he's back and forth to the Holy Land all the time. Just got back from a St. Paul cruise and is leaving for the Holy Land tomorrow. And in fact, he and his wife Janet are going to be our guides, Debbie, when you and I go to the Holy Land with the Vocation Boom pilgrimage in December. And Steve's got some trips coming up that we'll let him tell you about. But Steve, welcome back to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. How are you? Are you getting any rest?
Thanks, Jerry. Good to be here with you. Yeah, we just got back a day ago from Turkey, Greece, and Rome, and 2 days at home to do the laundry, repack our suitcases, and we're heading back to Israel. We have a sold-out trip in this week, and with your group in December, we have another sold-out trip with a waiting list. So yeah, we're not getting any sleep. We're keeping our schedule. We're getting up at 1 a.m. We're going to bed at 6 at night, because that way we're going to keep from getting jet lag, hopefully.
Wow, Steve, just hearing about all of your pilgrimages and all your trips, it's truly, just amazing. We kind of all live vicariously through you. I think you and Janet. So I think that's beautiful, your ministry that you do. But today, we're going to be talking about how we relate to non-Catholics. And Jerry's going to share what you had shared with us of the practical tools. But you being a convert to the Catholic faith, you really can speak really from experience on your encounters with Catholics prior to you coming into the church. And, Steve, I want to just throw this out there because the phone lines are already lighting up. And I know that a lot of people have different experiences and different takes on it. But I just have to ask you this question. I have been on so many car rides home where I have been with other groups of people, and we've been at events, and somebody who is not non-Catholic has engaged in a conversation, and almost always throws something in that is like just a Catholic, Christian deal breaker of a theology question. And it kind of shocks all of us, stumps all of us. And on the car ride home, it almost always happens like this, where somebody who's a Catholic will say, I should have said this. I could have said that. And then they ultimately say, I feel so guilty I didn't say this or I didn't say that. I mean, I really would love to hear your thoughts about that. I mean, what is our responsibility when we're talking to people who are not Catholic yet?
Our job is to be an evangelist and to be a peacemaker. And it's oftentimes these evangelicals, who I'm sure you just were referring to, they tend to be very aggressive. They have been taught that Catholics are not Christians, many of them, that Catholics need to be saved. I know this is a tradition I came from. I was raised that Catholics were going to hell, and that if we really loved them and had any charity for the Catholics, we would tell them the gospel. And most of the time that comes across very aggressively and forcefully, and Catholics tend to be much more gentle about things. They don't talk about their faith. They say, well, it's personal. It's not something you talk about. And the evangelical thinks, of course it's something you talk about. We got to get people saved. So you have this almost a cultural divide. And Catholics often get stuck in this where the evangelical, or it might be something else, it might be a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or an atheist or a secularist or something else. And they are quite aggressive, and they feel that Catholics are fair game and that Catholics have no idea what they believe, and even if they did, they don't have any foundation for it. And we find ourselves in this situation very often. In my own family, we have a contingency of Catholics. Now that I converted, others in my family converted, and I'm sure that a lot of people have the same situation. And so what we could do today is just talk about my 7 rules of how to deal with family and friends that are non-Catholics, and I think that it will help cause, especially with the holidays coming up, help make things much more peaceful and give people a sense of confidence.
All right, our phone number for you to be on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and Steve Ray, 1-800-585-9396. When we say non-Catholics, as Steve just pointed out, these don't have to be evangelicals or Protestants. They could be Jehovah's. How do you deal with the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons who come to your door or trap you at the water cooler at work? These sorts of things. Or again, the growing number of atheists, agnostics who feel empowered. They feel emboldened by all these high-profile atheists and so forth who are publishing books and this growing movement and so forth. 1-800-585-9396. So, Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got 7 rules for dealing with non-Catholic family and friends. We've got about 5 minutes till the break. So if you can take each one just really in a nugget, and then we can flesh some of them out as the show goes on.
Okay, I had 6 originally, but then last week my wife and I were talking, and I said, there's 7. There's 7. There's another one that we have to add to this, because 7's a perfect number. 7 days of the week, 7 sacraments, 7 archangels. So I realized there was 7. Anyway, here they are. Number 1 is don't argue, especially if it's going to burn bridges. That doesn't mean don't discuss. We can discuss, and we can even argue depending on who it is. If it's done in a charitable way where it's done where we're not burning bridges or making enemies. So that's number 1, is if you start getting into an argument, if you push someone, their natural reaction is to push back. And if we get into that kind of an argument, it's going to cause more trouble than it does help. So number 1, don't argue. Number 2 is love them more than you ever loved them before, because love is the argument you can't argue with. You cannot argue with love. If someone loves you and they're just going out of their way to love you, it's very, very difficult to argue with that person. So love them more than ever before. This is especially true of a husband and a wife, by the way. If there is a difference of agreement there, the spouse should love their other spouse more than ever before. Child that left the faith, any of these kind of things. Number 3, educate yourself. What would happen if after you've prayed for someone and worked with them for 20 years, all of a sudden they come and have a question about the Eucharist, and you say, I don't have a clue? That's not a good scenario. So I say that of studying and learning our faith, learning apologetics, learning the Bible, learning if that person is a Jehovah's Witness, learning what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach and what we teach to counteract it. So when they eventually do come and have a question, we know how to answer that question. Number 4, pray and make sacrifices. And this isn't just a cliche. Often we say, we'll pray for you, just pray about it. That's a cliche often. I mean really making a point of praying and holding God accountable. He said, if you ask, you'll receive. Okay, good, God, you said that. I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to start praying, and I'm making sacrifices. Number 5, display the joy of the Lord in your life. If you're angry and you're bitter and you're unhappy, nobody's going to want to talk to you about what. Of course, you don't have the truth because you're a miserable person. You're a miserable, stinking person. Who wants to be what you are? In other words, have the joy of the Lord. Show the joy and the peace that you have and make other people want what you have. Honey attracts more flies than vinegar does. Number 6, be patient. God's not in as big a hurry as we are. Be patient with people. I know in my own conversion it took time. If you'd have pushed me, you'd only push me farther away. Be patient with these people. Love them, patient, and give God time to work in their life. And the last one I think is the most important. You want to save it for later to be a secret, or tell it now?
Well, we could take a quick break and then we could come back. You could make it
the last
kind of
one, the most important one. Let's leave a little suspense here.
You took the words right out of my mouth. So we're going to get ready to take that quick break, and we're on with Steve Ray talking about how to really relate to our non-Catholic friends and family members. This is Take 2 with Jerry and Debbie. We want you to stay with us. This is an exciting discussion, but share your take at 1-800-585-9396. We will be right back after this break. Stay with us.
"60 Seconds" with Mother Angelica.
The good news is that as we struggle and God pours grace into us and we correspond and we rise and we fall, rise and fall, God in His infinite mercy loves us, keeps us going, gives us strength and courage and joy. Joy. Be joyful. Go on, smile. It won't hurt you. Even if you got a problem. Even if you got a problem. Smile at your neighbor. I want you to remember a little sentence. And the sentence is this. You may be the only Jesus your neighbor will ever see. I want you to know your dignity. I want you to know how great you are before God.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
Hello, this is Father Larry Richards, host of EWTN Open Line Thursdays, and you are listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Take 2 with Jerry. You could be their link, their lifeline to Christ and eventually to the Catholic Church and salvation. So it's really a very important conversation. If you've got a question or a take, 1-800-585-9396. All right, Steve and Debbie, here we go to the phones. We're going to go to Gretchen in Nashville, Tennessee, up first. Gretchen, thanks for calling. Take 2 with Jerry and Debbie. You're on with Steve Ray. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Better now that you called, Gretchen.
Yay. I listen to you guys every day, and this is my first time calling.
Awesome.
So I work from home, so I listen to you guys all the time.
Thank you.
So I guess my question is that years ago, I'm a cradle Catholic, and I had a friend that was not. She had just found Jesus, and she was, just on fire for the Lord, and she kind of attacked me on my faith, and I had no idea how to respond as a Catholic, so I was very embarrassed. And so that kind of led me on a little journey. Well, my husband is Protestant, and we've been married for about 12 years. But so I guess in the beginning of our our marriage, he was going to go to the RCIA, but he just still wasn't ready for it, so he stopped going. So I guess my hope has been these past 12 years is that he will convert. But I was listening to the 7 steps that Dr. Ray was talking about and writing each one down. But I've gone through all of those. But I guess we start to argue if I start to talk about our faith, and I feel, I guess I'm not knowledgeable enough because he seems to know so much more because he was raised Assembly of God. But I'm trying to figure out how to approach him, and I've prayed, I've said novenas, I've said, or I've fasted, but I guess I'm just not being patient enough. So I'm just trying to figure out how to approach it.
And the best thing you can do with your husband is love him and love him and love him some more. And that means intimacy. That means listening to him, respecting him, not arguing with him. You arguing with him is not going to do any good. It's only going to drive him further away and confirm that he's right. We are correct in the Catholic Church. And if I sat down with your husband sometime, or somebody like Tim Staples or Jerry here, he wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But a lot of times it's not a theological issue. There are other issues involved. Emotional issues, tradition, family ties, a lot of things like that, fear or lies that they've heard about the Catholic Church or misconceptions. But I always say for a husband and a wife, the best thing a wife can do is to not argue with her husband, to love him more than you've ever loved him before, and love eventually can bring him in. Yes, you want to convert him, but the most important thing at this point is to make your marriage stable. If you have so many things that you can share in common, a love of Scripture, a love of Jesus, a knowledge of heaven, all of these things that you and your husband do have in common, I would emphasize those things. Find ways that you can share what you have in common. That doesn't mean that you compromise your Catholic faith. You still do. Practice it and love the distinctives that we have as a Catholic. But I found that in many situations, I can't tell you how many husbands and wives I've talked to where the Catholic spouse, over a period of time, won their other spouse in just by loving them and being patient and not arguing with them. And keep praying, be patient, all of those things. But remember that the primary thing is to love your husband more than you've ever loved him before. I think that's the key issue.
That is great advice, Steve. Great advice. Gretchen, do you have any further comments on that?
No, that all sounds wonderful. So I will even more so. I guess I just approaching it. Should I ask him to be open-minded about the Eucharist? Should I just try?
I would just tell him, look, I love you, who you are, and what you believe. I love you because of who you are. If we someday agree on things, that would be wonderful, and that would only make our relationship even richer. But at this point, I love you because of who you are and what you are, and the things that we have so much in common in what we believe. There are fewer things that we disagree on and more things that we agree on. Let's work on those things. Let's learn to pray together. Let's learn to read the Bible together. And if we have questions, let's have intelligent discussions. Don't argue about them. And, in the book of Peter wrote and said that Sarah, she called her husband Lord. And it says that a woman can win her husband without a word. She can win her husband without a word by her conduct.
Wow. Steve, let me ask you a quick question before we let Gretchen go. I'm just curious about this because you talked about reading Scripture together, praying together. My former husband is Jewish, and I remember one time getting this book when I was teaching religious education, Eucharistic Miracles by Joan Cruz, and I brought it home, and not as a teaching tool, if you will, I just said, hey, can we read this one story together? And we started reading the different stories of Eucharistic miracles, and it really, but just by him reading it, the facts of it, and it just like totally started penetrating his heart. I mean, it was really interesting. Well, would that be something that Gretchen could do together, not as a teaching thing, but read it together?
I think so. And also books on the saints. And you may have to read along with some book that he wants to read along with, too. And he may say, okay, I'll read your book with you if you read this book with me. And that's not a bad idea. It's a matter of sharing. You show mutual respect. You know, in a lot of cases, when a husband or a wife say that they're both evangelicals, and one starts to get this vision, it starts to get this epiphany that the Catholic Church is right, and they start learning about it. Many times they do it all by themselves, and then they announce to their spouse, guess what, I'm becoming a Catholic. That way of doing things is a great disrespect, and it is an insult to the other partner, because it's saying, you're not smart enough to do this journey with me. I did it on my own, and now I'm announcing to you what I've decided. It's far better to do it the way my wife and I did, because we got married young, and we said we're going to do everything together. And we did this journey together. If I came up with ideas, I'd say, dear, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? Let's look this up in the Bible or in different places and see what we think about this. It's always better to read and think and talk and pray together and swallow our pride a little bit once in a while and to say, ooh, that's wrong, but I'm not going to go and punch him in the nose about it right now. I'm going to move slowly and patiently, lovingly and charitably. You're not giving away your Catholic faith by doing that. You don't have to defend it. It's like you don't have to defend a lion. Just give him let the leash go, and the lion can defend himself. The Catholic Church, in a way, doesn't need to be defended. All you need to do is let it loose. And I would just think in this situation, the best thing is find things that you can share together, read together, discuss together, pray together, because there's a lot more in common that you have than you do and that you have in disagreement.
Gretchen, thanks again very much for the call. We'll have you in prayer. And Elizabeth, you will be next. We've just got about a minute or two here before our hard break here, Elizabeth. So we don't want to start your question with Steve and then have to interrupt that. So another couple minutes of patience. You will get on the air next. And we've got others we're going to take on the air as well. We're talking with Steve Ray about how to relate to non-Catholics. Our number is 1-800-585-9396. As you're listening to Steve, has any of what he's saying worked for you? Have you managed to win somebody over? Or maybe you've tried something and it kind of made things a little bit more difficult, to convince someone of Catholicism, and you just want to say, hey, how can I kind of bring this back around? 1-800-585-9396. And before we go to the break, Steve, real quick, you mentioned your 7 rules for dealing with non-Catholics. Don't argue, love more than ever, educate yourself, pray and sacrifice, display joy, be patient, and then the 7th one we held off on. So why don't we do that right now? We got about 1 minute before we go to the break. What's number 7?
Number 7 is ask God to bring someone else into their life because they're never going to listen to you. We think it's our job to get somebody saved, our job to convert them to the Catholic faith, our job to change the way they think, where it's not at all. It's the Holy Spirit's job. We cannot do that. We can plant seeds. We can be a tool or an instrument of God. But oftentimes, family and friends are the toughest ones to deal with. It's hard. It's easier to talk to a stranger than it is to a family member about things like this that are often very emotional and charged. So I say ask God to bring somebody else into their life that they respect, that they trust, that they admire. Ask God to bring somebody like that into their life to influence them, because it's not necessarily our job to save our family and friends. It's the Holy Spirit's job. Let him maybe use someone else.
Wow. Steve, those are practical tips and tools. You hear that beautiful music. We're going to take that break. When we come back, dear listeners, after the show, you can go on take2show.com because Jeff Burson, our social media expert, put all of Steve's wonderful tips on the website, take2show.com. But stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, you're going to hear more from our listeners on Take Two.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN Newslink. Pope Francis outlines his vision for the church, insisting it shun all temptation of power, prestige, and money. He told the Italian bishops in Florence today he wants a church that's humble and poor, not obsessed with doctrine or acquiring power. Speaking to thousands in the industrial city of Prato, Italy, Pope Francis denounces the exploitation of illegal workers. That city was the site of a 2013 garment factory fire that killed 7 Chinese workers. A federal appeals court in Texas rules against President Obama's immigration plan. The plan would protect an estimated 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation. 26 states challenged the plan in court. And the Senate is expected to vote on a defense bill today that bans moving Guantanamo Bay detainees to the United States. President Obama has tried to do that since his term began. That bill passed the House last week. Join us tonight for EWTN News Nightly.
Now he wants to play the judge. That's the response of Sodom when Lot refused to go along with their sin. You see, the tactic of silencing people by condemning them as judgmental or mean for being clear on moral issues is very, very old. It's also very inaccurate. Disagreeing with someone is not the same thing as personally judging them. Jesus was very clear that it's wrong for us to judge people's souls. That's above our pay grade. But we have to judge actions in order to know how to act. When we don't judge people, that makes us holy. When we don't judge actions, that makes us unthinking. And when we see someone commit a moral evil, something that's bad for their bodies, souls, or society, and we choose not to say anything about it to protect our own necks, that makes us unloving. You see, sometimes love demands that we speak the truth, even at the risk of being deemed judgmental for it. This is Chris Stefanik from RealLifeCatholic.com on EWTN Radio.
How to relate to non-Catholic family and friends and even people we don't know. Kathleen said on Facebook, I am a Catholic married to a Baptist. We raise our children Catholic. He helps maintain the church property and helps people out at church. He attends the Catholic Church every week faithfully. I have not pushed him into conversion, and yes, we have talked about some of the differences of our faith. And Tressie, beautiful comment here. My mother married an agnostic. My father had never been baptized. He was baptized and received into the church in the last years of his life, even praying the rosary with us. So, Debbie, some great comments coming in on Facebook this morning.
Super ones. And I got to just tell you, how about Maureen's? I think Maureen's really nails it when it says having shared religious beliefs with coworkers, friends, whoever would ask. And many have told many have told Catholics that they never knew much about what Catholics believe except from the warnings by their grandmothers. Well, that is so true. And so she was saying, be open, answer questions in the way we do things, and don't try to convert anyone. Kind of summing up exactly what you were saying, Steve. But that is interesting. What about that, Steve? Did you have that in your family? Did you get like warnings from other family members? Watch out for those Catholics. They believe ...
Oh, when I was raised, of course, my family, my mom and dad were new Baptist converts, and so they were very excited. And the two first things they learned is that if you accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior and ask Him to come into your heart, which is not in the Bible, by the way, that's Protestant tradition. They learned that, and they also learned that Catholics are a perfect counterfeit of the truth, using the same book and many of the same words so that they can deceive people and take them to hell. So I was born and raised with the idea that we evangelicals were correct and the Baptists were lost, and we had to get them saved. And, of course, we were very aggressive about it. Our, evangelicals and fundamentalists, they tend to be very aggressive against Catholics at times. There are some now that are much more willing to discuss and dialogue and more easygoing about it. But there are still a good number out there, especially in our country. And if you're in the Bible Belt, for example, Texas, Kentucky, Mississippi, and so on, where there's a great antipathy to Catholicism, and oftentimes it's built right into them to argue and fight with you about it, but it's also, on many of them, they consider it a matter of charity. They're trying to keep you from walking off a cliff into hell and trying to get you to become a real Bible Christian. So we have to understand also where the person's coming from so that we can have sympathy and a compassion for them. Oftentimes, if somebody comes up and argues with us, I just hug them, and I say, you know what, I really appreciate that you care enough about me and love me enough to really be honest and to confront me about this. We disagree on this, but I want you to know I really love you and thank you for your concern for my soul.
Well, then Maureen was right. We just have to, answer questions, be loving, like you said, Steve, and like Maureen said, and just, really answer those questions, but don't, try to convert. So I think that is great. Steve,
right.
we like...
And Debbie, we do want to convert them, but
okay.
if they know that that's what our goal is, sometimes, if you have two football teams that are competing and you're trying to get the other guy to like your football team instead of theirs, it causes conflict. Of course, we want to convert them because ultimately our goal is to evangelize and bring people into a right relationship with Jesus. And just knowing Jesus isn't enough because the evangelism doesn't end until we're all in one house eating one meal at once, a table, the Eucharist.
Right,
but it doesn't mean that we have to fight and push. We can be patient about it and be gentle about it, and we don't have to give up anything of our own distinctives, our own Catholic faith. But our goal ultimately is to convert them. But if you tell somebody, "I'm going to convert you," my goal is to convert you, you've already lost the battle.
Right. It's in God's time. That's a good point. Well, Steve, on this show, Jerry and I like to give out a Patience Award, and we were going to give it to Elizabeth in Nevada, who was waiting so patiently, but she just dropped off. So, Elizabeth, call back if you can. We want to just honor you with that nice verbal award that you were so patient. But we're going to move right along to Lynn in Front Royal, Virginia. Lynn, you are next up on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and our guest, Steve Ray. Welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Lynn.
Well, one thing as you were all talking, are you saying that people of other faiths are not saved, like they're lost, they're not going to heaven?
Nope, not saying that at all.
Oh, okay. And then the other thing, you were saying something earlier about, as we discussed back and forth with non-Catholic people, whatever, and then they come to realize that, the Catholics were right. And I guess my question was, right about what? What are we trying to tell them we're right about?
Okay, first of all, I would never, because the Catholic Church never has taught, nor does Scripture, that a person that's not in the visible bounds of the Catholic Church sitting there in a Catholic pew every Sunday at Mass can't be saved. The Catholic Church also is quite liberal about that and saying that if someone, due to no fault of their own, and yet they don't know of Jesus and seek after him with a clear conscience, and they would, and they obey their conscience, these two may be saved. So we're not saying that somebody can't be saved unless they're in a Catholic Church, first of all. But one of the reasons why we would like to see people in the Catholic Church, because it's the fullness of the faith. It's given. It's like the mother. Somebody once said, if you don't have the Church as your mother, you can't have God as your father, because the two are together. God has given us a church. It's like our mother on earth. She's the one that gives birth to us through baptism. She's the one that feeds us through the Eucharist. She's the one that brings healing to us through the sacraments and forgiveness through confession. It's the great mother the Church is. And we want people to understand that the Catholic Church has not taught error in 2,000 years, that it's the fullness of the faith. It's the difference between being on a raft and being on a cruise liner. And when I was on a raft as a Protestant, and I looked up finally and saw this cruise liner and said, wait a minute, it would be much better to be on that cruise liner to get to the other side than on this raft. And so we want people to become Catholic because we understand that in the Catholic Church we have the fullness of the faith. It's been here since 2,000 years, since Jesus founded it. And what we know about the Church is, first of all, we have a Pope that is our source of unity, keeps leading us forward, number 266 since Peter. We have the bread and wine, which become the body and blood of Jesus, and we have the real food. Jesus said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life, and I'll raise you up on the last day. In the Catholic Church, we have all these wonderful riches, and of course we want people to join us in this beautiful family.
How's that, Lynn?
He was talking about the very same thing about the body and blood of Christ that we have to eat and drink. And I mean, he sounded like he was right on board with the same thing that we believe. So I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm just confused about what are they wrong about? Are they wrong about the actual presence of the Lord in the Eucharistic celebration, that sort of thing?
Yes, I would say even bigger than that. Let's put it this way, that Jesus formed one church, and in John chapter 17, he said, I pray that you will all be one and perfected in visible unity, so that the world may know the Father sent the Son. In other words, Jesus formed one family, and there's one meal, which is the Eucharist. And this one family that he formed in 1500s, Martin Luther and others, they broke away and said, we're not going to be part of this family. We're going to go start our own groups. And now there are 40,000 plus different sects and denominations and groups all out there doing their own thing. And the world looks at us, at Christians, and says, wait a minute, you tell us you have the truth, but I look out there, you can't even agree among yourselves. You have 40,000 different groups. You have different ideas about everything. Listen here, Christians, why don't you get your own house in order? And when you figure it out, then we'll listen to you. And the sad thing is we want people to become Catholic because the Catholic is the original family that Jesus started. It's a visible institution. It has a pope. It has the sacraments. And those who broke away are like flocks of sheep who left, and it does a great disservice for the whole world. And Jesus said that the people will know that we're Christians by our love and by our visible unity. So that's what's really the big problem. That's what's really the issue. Jesus started the church 2,000 years ago, and we want people to be back in that one church that he founded.
All right, Lynn, thank you very much for your call. Great questions for Steve Ray today on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We've got time to get others of you on the program as we talk about relating to non-Catholic family members and friends, especially but not exclusively with the holidays coming up. 1-800-585-9396. Pick up that phone and join us here, as Kristen has done from Portland, Oregon. Love our modern-day radio listeners. Hi, Kristen. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and Steve Ray.
Hi. I just had a comment. And actually something else occurred to me, a story I got to tell Steve before I get off the air. But the whole concept of surrender, I heard so much anxiety in that caller a couple of minutes ago talking about her husband and feeling like there was something that she needed to be doing. You know, if she came up with the right approach, if she came up with the right novena, if she came up with the right intervention, that he would suddenly see the light. And you know, I'm a convert. Most of my family is still Protestant, and I just have experienced so much the power of surrender. It's God making these things happen. You know, he loves to use us, but it doesn't depend on us. And the closer we are to him, the easier it is for him to use us to bring these souls into the church, because he wants them to convert even more than we do.
I agree. You're absolutely right. That's kind of my point. Be patient. Just surrender it to the Lord. It's his job to save them. It's his job to convert them. It's not our job. We have to be cooperating. Of course, we need to pray and do novenas or whatever else we can do and love them. But ultimately, it's the Holy Spirit's job. We should just be instruments, and I agree with you completely, to just surrender it to God. Say, God, this is your job. Use me the way you want. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be loving. I'm going to be ready to answer the questions. But I agree with you. Surrender to the Lord and be peaceful about it.
Kristen, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I've been praying for my parents to come into the church for years. And about a year, maybe 2 years ago, I happened to just email my dad about he had commented about in an email about something he thought was neat that Pope Francis had done, and I commented back to him, emailed him back, and I said, I sure wish we could talk you into crossing the Tiber, and I linked to Steve's blog, and I didn't say another word. And my mother called me maybe a week or two later, and she said, Kristen, he bought that book. He's reading that book. Oh, my
goodness.
Wow.
And long story short, my parents were received into the church last Easter.
Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful. That book I wrote, Crossing the Tiber, by the way, is a good book to give to people who are wondering about the Catholic faith, or you want to give them something to read. It's not a hostile book. I wrote it for my father because he was a Baptist deacon, and when I converted, it started out actually with the words, it changed over time, but it started out with the words, Dear Mom and Dad, you're the best parents in the world, and then I owe you an explanation. It was a love letter to my parents, that book was. And my kids were the first ones to be converted from it because through it, I said the kids told us that they were not going to convert with us because we taught them too well about the Catholic Church before. So they said, you already taught us about this, and now you expect us to join that thing you told us about? Well, I gave them that letter I wrote to my dad, and they both came down with tears in their eyes, my oldest two, and said, we're going to join with you. It was a good letter, Dad. And that letter eventually became the book Crossing the Tiber.
Wow.
But I agree with you completely about this. It's a matter of just resting in the Lord and trusting Him and letting Him use us. And I'm so glad that your family came in. That's beautiful. I rejoice with you about that because that is a huge blessing and a victory, but you obviously handled it well without pushing and making enemies. Let me just say, number 7 was allowing God to bring somebody else into their life. Let me just tell you our family experience with some of our family members who wouldn't even talk to us for a long time because we became Catholic. They were just hostile to us, and I prayed every day, Lord, you said that if I asked, you would receive. And you write down the date that you start asking and saying, and over on this column, I'm going to put the date where you answer it because you promised that you'd listen to me. And so here we go. I'm going to pray every day, and I'm going to hold you accountable to your promises. I think we should do that with the Lord once in a while. And I prayed every day for over a year. And then this relative was camping with another family, and the two women were book readers. They joined book clubs. They shared book ideas. And one day, this other lady, our relative didn't even know she was Catholic, said, I just read the best book I've ever read in my life. And our relative said, well, what was it? I'll get a copy. She said, it's called Crossing the Tiber. Relative said, who wrote it? She said, a guy named Stephen Ray. Our relative said, you're kidding. He just converted to the Catholic Church. You like his book? She said, it's the best book I've ever read. She said, it was so interesting, helped me understand more about Christianity and the Catholic Church. Well, the bottom line is our relatives read that book, and they were no longer hostile to us. They didn't become Catholics. But all of a sudden, they wanted to read everything I'd done and watched our movies, and they were all complimentary, telling their friends. In other words, God did a miracle because I prayed and asked Him to bring somebody else into their life. And within a year, He did that, and all the hostility was gone. Sure, I'd like them to become Catholics too, but my goodness, we're 50% of the way there.
Oh, beautiful story, Steve. Beautiful. Kristen, thank you so much from Portland, Oregon. We're glad you called in today. You really brightened Steve's day and ours as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely is right. And we're going to take one more break, Steve. When we get back, we're going to go to Carl, who's been waiting patiently in New York. So hold on, Carl. We're going to get to you on this break after this break. But stay with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Matt Swaim here, inviting you to start your day a better way with the Sunrise Morning Show, weekday mornings here on EWTN. It's a fast-paced program where we cover apologetics, scriptures, and the saint of the day, plus news, sports, entertainment, and family life, all from a Catholic perspective. So join us weekday mornings here on EWTN.
The Sunrise Morning Show. Can't wait to start your day.
For a complete list of the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network AM and FM stations across America, go to EWTN.com. Look for the radio pull-down menu and select AM/FM stations. The list is updated regularly, so visit often. Again, go to EWTN.com. Look for the radio pull-down menu and select AM/FM stations. Also at EWTN.com, you'll find out how to listen to us on the web, on shortwave, and in some countries on satellite. You'll find it all on EWTN.com.
Hi, this is Marcus Grodi. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
We are glad you're there today. Thanks for being a listener to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. 1-800-585-9396. How to relate to non-Catholic family members or friends. We're going to go next to Carl, as promised. Carl is in New York. And Carl, we have Steve Ray as our guest. So, two with Jerry and Debbie. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And how are you?
Doing well,
my
thanks,
comment
Carl.
to be that, it seems like no matter where, what religion we're from, we're striving for one thing, and we're striving to be with God someday, to be in His glory. And even though we come from different denominations, we're basically saying, I think, basically the same thing for salvation, looking for a way to reach heaven and being with God and looking at Him face to face someday. And it doesn't make any difference which one. No one is better than the other. We should all look at it like we're in the same line, striving for the same thing, and that the cross is our salvation to heaven.
I
the
agree.
cross is
I
a
agree
sign,
completely with
a
that.
symbol of it.
And I would say that's completely true. Our goal is that all of us get to heaven and all of us face Jesus and be there for all of eternity. And that's why I'm concerned about keeping lines of communication open. That's why I'm concerned about being able to talk to people about the fullness of the faith, because I think that people that are on the cruise ship have a much better chance of getting there than people on a raft. And when I was born and raised on a raft, basically, and didn't even know there was a ship, and once I discovered the Catholic Church, I realized it's the fullness of the faith. And because I love my family and I love my enemies and I love these people, of course, I'm always doing everything I can to bring them to the fullness of the faith so that they have as good a chance as anybody else does. I have a kind of selfish motivation with my family because I want them to be in heaven with me. I intend to get there. By the blood and mercy of Jesus Christ, I plan to be there, and the forgiveness for my sins. And I want my family to be there as well. And that's why I'm so concerned about sharing with them all the fullness of the faith. Good comment.
Yeah, that was very good, Carl. Thank you for
Carl.
Yeah,
did you want to add on anything, Carl?
Well, yes. I was just going to say that my father was a Catholic. He converted to a Lutheran, and it was a little controversial a little bit growing up with his ideas and all that. But basically, he knew the Catholics' religion. He knew it basically all of it, but he just didn't want to be part of it anymore. But basically, my mother won. She got me to being faithful, and I know. But I think we basically mean that we will all get there someday, no matter which angle we come from. There's many roads to heaven, and as long as we're doing the right thing by God and we're asking Him for His graces and His love for us, He will give us those graces, I think.
I tend to agree with
Steve,
you almost all the way. That I don't think we're all going to get to heaven because it says, wide is the way that leads to destruction and narrow is the way that leads to life. Jesus Himself said that there's a narrow gate that leads to life, but there's a wide gate that leads to destruction, and few there are that find the narrow gate. So I'm not too optimistic that everybody's going to make it. That's called universalism. There are some going to make it and some aren't, but I do everything I can to be a good example and love people so that I can help them find the narrow gate as well. But good comment and good sentiments you have, definitely.
Yeah, Carl, thank you for calling, and I would just echo what Steve said, and I love your heart on this, Carl. I absolutely do. I just wanted to mention, comment on one thing that Carl said. He said, no one is better than anyone else, and it doesn't get down to being better. Christianity isn't true or Catholicism isn't true because I believe it or we believe it, but rather I believe it or we believe it because it's true. And, Jesus went through an awful lot to give us one church, and it is through the Catholic Church. And this is this is another show topic. This could be university courses, semester courses on salvation coming through the Catholic Church. But God, as Steve said earlier in the show, God makes that available to those who, through no fault of their own, seek Him with a clear conscience in other ways. But that is known only to God. That is not. We cannot necessarily bank on that, but we certainly pray for that. Steve, we got about 2 minutes to go, and speaking of going, you and Debbie and I and about 60 others are going to the Holy Land in December, and you've got some other trips coming up too. Man, you make me tired. Every time I email you, I get 5 minutes doesn't go by, and I hear back from you Oh, I'm in the Mediterranean. I'm in Israel. I'm in Greece. Steve, you're amazing. So what trips are coming up that people should know
thank
about?
You. By the way, I just put up a blog about this show, The 7 Rules. It's called Getting Ready for the Holidays, Steve Ray's 7 Rules for Dealing with Non-Catholic Family and Friends. It's at CatholicConvert.com, and I put a link to your show on there, Jerry. I wrote an article for Catholic Answers magazine, and I put a link to that as well, for the whole article. So if anybody wants to read my whole article about the rules, I've got it up on Catholic Answers magazine, and I put a link at CatholicConvert.com. Also at CatholicConvert.com, you can see our pilgrimages. We have a wonderful one going to Poland in September of next year for the Year of Mercy. We're going to pray the Divine Mercy with Sister Faustina's sisters at her convent. So Poland for the Year of Mercy. We've got a trip coming up in March, and in fact, we're going to be in Jerusalem on the Feast Day of the Divine Mercy. We're going to pray the Divine Mercy in Jerusalem in March, so people can join up for that one. We also have a trip to Guadalupe. We have another one that's a brand new one, Jerry. This is the first time we've done this trip. It's all the way across the country of Turkey. Very safe country, very beautiful. People are afraid of Istanbul, but we just got back a week ago. We were there a week ago, and people love Turkey and Istanbul. It's beautiful. It's the second Holy Land. There's more biblical sites there than anywhere else other than Israel. So we've got a lot of fun trips coming up next year at CatholicConvert.com.
Wow, that it does make me exhausted. Well, Steve, we just want to thank you so very, very much. You are an amazing person that is doing great ministry work. And in all your travels, we pray that you have continued safe travels and just continue to spread the gospel message the way you do with such joy. We do takeaways here on Take Two. And my takeaway today is just really the idea, the kind of the quote that was attributed to St. Francis, which even though we don't really know if he actually said it, but he lived it in his life, as preach the gospel always, and if necessary use words, or even how Pope Francis talks about the joy of the gospel. That joy of just knowing that you can tap into that fullness of truth, the fullness of faith in the Catholic Church, should just come out. I just feel like it should come out of all of us, and they'll know us by the way we look and the way we act. Yep. Jerry, you're
joy of the Lord.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, my takeaway is we've got a beautiful, beautiful pearl of great price. Let us follow Steve's 7 rules. They're on the website at take2show.com, and we will make a great difference for the Lord. Steve, 47 days, 14 hours, 5 minutes, and 36 seconds. We're going to the Holy Land with you, Debbie and I. Can't wait. We're looking forward to it, Steve.
I'm going to take good care of you, and let's do a part 2 of this show.
Yep, we're going to broadcast, God willing, every day, Take Two with Jerry and Debbie from the Holy Land. So, Deb, I know you are excited about that, too.
I am certainly excited. And tomorrow's Veterans Day, so join us on Take Two. But until then, we want to wish you a beautiful, blessed, and joyous day. See you tomorrow.